Hey, I'm Alicia, your non-monogamous relationship coach. Welcome to the podcast where my friends and I chat about our relationships, enthusiastic non-monogamy, polyamory, swinging, kink, and our lives. You'll get a candid peek into what makes it worth it to live life outside the box. And in case you're still wondering, nope, we're not monogamous. Hello. I am really excited to welcome Eleanor O'Brien to the show today. Eleanor is the artistic director of Dance Naked Creative, a sex-positive theater and event company. She's a writer, a performer, a facilitator. She's the creator of a whole bunch of solo shows like Plan V, How to Really Love a Woman, Lust and Marriage. And she directed and starred in a whole bunch of ensemble productions. And she also hosts a monthly erotic open mic called Stand Up Smut. That sounds really exciting. And teaches workshops around exploring the intersection between sexuality and creativity. And today, Eleanor is sharing with us her journey of from monogamy to non-monogamy and how that looked for her and how polyamory helped her expand her sexuality and how writing a show about polyamory helped Eleanor work through the challenges in her marriage. It's a fascinating story and a really fun and lively conversation. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. And also, if you are interested in hearing Eleanor's behind the scenes, just the tip, sex tip, which is fantastic, you're going to need to be a friend with benefits on patreon.com/notmonogamous. So go check it out. Enjoy the show. Okay, well, first of all, welcome and thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
pleasure.
And it's nice to meet you. I
Dude.
I checked out, I haven't watched the whole thing, but I've checked out part of your show. It was pretty good.
Mhm.
Really enjoy
Thank
that.
you.
Okay, so nope, we're not monogamous. So clearly the premise here is that we're not monogamous. And so I'd like to ask you what non-monogamy looks like for you in your life.
Well, right now it looks like solo poly or polyam, I guess is what we're saying now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, although, for actually, I'm like, well, I take that back. I've never actually really identified. That's not true. Eleanor, what do you want to say?
Who am I?
Who am I? Why am I here? No, for years I did identify as polyamorous. When I met my husband, he had just come out of a marriage and we literally met like the day they split. Like they had been emotionally, separate for a while, but that was the day that they split. He went to this party that was put on by a group in Portland called Love Tribe. And it was sort of,
Mm-hmm.
a sex party. And I was at that party and I was like, oh, that guy. And so we met there and then we met at another party a week later. And on our first date, he was like, hey, I just got out of this marriage and I really like you, but I'm not ready to, sort of be monogamous. And I had read The Ethical Slut. So I knew how to do it. And I was like, I'm in, I'm signing up for that.
I'm basically an
And
expert now.
I know, basically. I did all the quizzes at the end of the chapter. So we got together, and this was like in 2005. And for the first year and a half, we did that thing where we're polyamorous, but we don't actually see any other people because we're so into each other.
Yeah.
And then he went on a date. Oh, I'll never forget that. I threw a glass at the wall. I've never done anything like that before or since. But that like jealousy, like surge where you're like, nah. And that was really informative for me because I was like, oh, I didn't even know I had it in me to throw a glass, like not at anyone, but like at the wall.
Sure.
But that began our journey. And we started seeing other people. I wrote a show, or I did a show called, and I had a show that I did about women's sexual fantasies that was called Inviting Desire. And we ended up doing a whole Inviting Desire about polyamory and ethical non-monogamy in 2012. And that was really informative because I had to write a lot about my feelings about it to create pieces for the show.
Mhm.
And I remember writing a piece about how polyamory really helped me expand my sexuality. Like I just got to explore so much more than I ever had, like dabbling in BDSM and all the various flavors, right? Um, but I didn't have I guess I wouldn't say it was like true polyamory because I didn't have relationships with other people. I mostly
Mm.
just had dates.
Yeah.
And then I in somewhere in there I met somebody that I did fall in love with. And so then we did have a V or whatever, where I was married, but I had a boyfriend.
Yeah.
And that's why I wrote Lust and Marriage, because I wanted to have a positive portrayal of polyamory, which I didn't see much in, our culture.
Yeah.
So I wrote that as a love story. Um, and the ironic part about that was I was touring that show across Canada in 2015. And that was when my marriage kind of started falling apart. Um, which was really challenging because it was a very autobiographical show. And it was supposed to be about how like this polyamory thing is so wonderful and it all worked out. And,
And look
so
at
I
look at
kept
our happily ever after.
out right. And I had to keep rewriting the fucking ending. Because I was like, well, yeah. So that that what happened in that period is I started going to a group in Seattle called Relationship Anarchy
Uh-huh.
that I really liked. I felt like that really spoke to me more than polyamory.
Yeah.
Partly because I felt like in some ways it was fraudulent to call myself polyamorous because what happened was in my marriage, we had stopped having sex and I was only having sex with my boyfriend. So in some ways it was, I was like, am I really actually monogamous? And,
Mm.
but I had, emotional relationships with both of them. Um, and then when my marriage ended, I was with my boyfriend for a couple of years and we were monogamous. Um, so the relationship anarchy for me really spoke to the idea that my relationships were dependent on who I was in a relationship with, not so much on like an internal like identification.
Yeah.
So um so I started a relationship anarchy group here in Portland and ran that for a couple of years. And so for a long time, that's how I would say I identified, was as a relationship anarchist. It's a funny thing though, because I feel like it's a little bit different for everybody who identifies that way, which is true for
Anarchy,
polyamory as
weird.
well. Yeah, I know, right? Um, so now I sort of identify as dating, I guess. Like I have a lover in California who comes and visits, and he'll stay with for a couple weeks at a time. Um, and I'm looking for another relationship that's closer to home.
Yeah.
So it's not monogamy, unless it's sort of default monogamy,
Right.
um, so somewhere between solo polyam and relationship anarchy, somewhere in
What a roller coaster. I love that.
there.
That's so good. That's so good. I had made a post on Facebook recently and I don't remember. Oh, I had asked how people would identify or label someone who was uh I don't remember what the question was. Some like if they were not polyamorous, but they were non-monogamous and into BDSM, like just kind of like navigate like all of these overlapping labels, right? And actually Dossie Eaton commented on there and was like, I call it all polyamory. Like it can be a 15-minute
Uh-huh.
relationship and there's still some love there. It's all polyamory. And I was like, huh, interesting.
Mhm.
I need to chew on that.
I mean, I guess I'd have to say no. I'd have to disagree because I don't know that I would use the term love for some of my, like, I just was touring in Europe, and I Tindered over in Europe because there's no there's no baggage, right? You're not going to
Yeah.
end up in a relationship with this person, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in Portland, I'm always like, oh, what,
Where's this gonna
I
go?
where's this going to go? We have friends in common. Am I going to have to let them down gently? All this, blah blah blah. So I really enjoyed being in Europe and just going on dates. And
Yeah.
maybe I'd, have a one night stand here and there. And I don't generally have sex with people I don't like, but I don't know that I would use the term love.
I love that. I don't generally have sex with people I don't like, you know, as a
I mean,
standard.
occasionally it
Occasionally, you never
happens.
know.
Uh, it's true, right? Um, there was at least one in Europe that I was like, that was a poor choice, Eleanor. You haven't done that in a while.
I've been there, done that.
In Portland, I've been involved in the sex positive communities for a long time because I have a theater company and I make shows about sexuality. So
Yeah.
so my work intersects and overlaps with a lot of communities. So there's Sex Positive Portland, and there's the BDSM community. I did a show about being a dominatrix, like so. So it's funny because I have a lot of the skill set around having multiple lovers and things like that. So one of the things, a friend of mine who ran Sex Positive Portland for a while, she came up with this acronym STARS, the STARS talk. Have you
Yeah,
heard about this?
Evelyn, she's been on my show.
Emily? Oh, cool. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
So so it was funny. I had sex with this guy in Berlin, and I was like, wow, that STARS talk just went straight out the window. Like, I did not even discuss one of the letters, much less the whole word. Um, but I would say generally, I'm pretty good about that kind
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, it's, I love so for the people listening, the Stars Talk is, sexual safety talk, essentially, where you have, like, a script and you kinda know what you're gonna say and what you're gonna ask, right? Like, but
Right. You got
you can always be
your
there.
STI status, your
Uh-huh.
turn-ons, your voids, your relationship expectations or style,
Uh-huh.
and your safer sex practices.
That's right. Damn, you're
Can be
good.
done
You've
in
got
any
this. Good job. Were you, before you got married, were you non-monogamous as well?
No, my husband was the first person I had ever been non-monogamous.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
don't think I would have been, except for that he was, really into the idea.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
that's
think
amazing.
I am default monogamous. I think that
Mm.
I was raised on I read more romance novels than I think any teenager ever. And I mean, from the time I was like in fifth grade and I started reading Sweet Valley Highs to the
Mhm.
time I went to college and I had, worked my way up to the thick, my mother called them titty romances. And I think I was so steeped in that like paradigm of true love means one person
Yeah.
that it's really hard for me to unwind that even now.
Yeah.
Um, I'll meet somebody, and if there's like some kind of spark, I immediately start the story of how we met and how it turns out this was my person and they're my one. And, I mean, like we
Yeah.
can have known each other for 20 minutes and I'm already sort of starting to spin that.
Uh-huh.
And I have to be really conscious of it. And now I warn people, I'm like, just so you know, I may do this to you, where I try to make you into my person after we spend the weekend together. Um, so at least I'm aware of it,
Yeah.
but yeah, it tends to be my default. I think and I think part of that is also laziness. Like, I'm like, okay, once my person's here, I don't have to I don't love dating and doing the dating apps and all of
Mm.
that. I mean, I like meeting people and I had a great date last night. It was Hump Fest here in Portland.
Yes.
Do you have Hump
We do in
where you
Seattle. Mhm.
are? Okay, okay.
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
Started in Seattle. Uh, well, I love Hump, and I go every year. And in fact, this year, so I put it out there on Facebook that I was looking for a date. And I was like, in fact, I'm looking for 2 dates. And I wanted to put together a threesome to go to Hump.
Uh-huh.
And so I ended up doing Zoom interviews with like a dozen people to see if I could like put together a fun threesome.
Brilliant idea.
And I realized, well, you know, what was cool was Dan Savage reposted it, which was kind of, because I have a little bit of a fan crush on Dan.
Mhm, mhm.
In Lust and Marriage, the tech conceit that I use with that show is that I'm writing letters and he's writing me back, and giving me advice about being polyamorous. Um, but yeah, so he retweeted that. So I tried to put together this threesome, but I realized I was dealing with so many unknowns because they were all people that were new to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's one thing to go on a date with somebody you've never met, but then to try to put them together with somebody else and have like a interesting triad was ambitious. It was a little ambitious. So I ended up going with a couple that had applied, and I already knew them because their first date was one of my shows. So they've known me. They've come to my shows, and so I picked them, and it was so fun. We had a great like fancy dinner beforehand, and then we went to the show together. And afterwards, I organized a discussion group at a bar, and about 20 people came, and we did like prompts and like about the different movies and like what film would you want to have been in, and
Uh-huh.
that kind of thing.
That's so much fun.
It was a good date. Yeah. It was a
That's
really
so
good date.
much fun. Oh.
So I think I'm in a phase of my life right now where I'm just giving in to the poly thing. I'm like, okay, that's I'm trying to really give up on the idea of I'm going to find my person and just enjoy myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the whole point, right, of life. Just gonna enjoy myself.
I'm just exactly. Well, I loved being married. I loved living with my husband. Like I love sleeping with my partner. Like I'm
Mm,
a nester. So I
yeah.
do, I still do want that. But it's been about 5 years since I've had that like in my life with like a really regular partner like that. And it just occurred to me. I was talking to a friend of mine, and she has um, seven lovers, that
Yeah.
she sees, sort of,
In a
2 of them she
rotation?
sees twice a month. Yeah. Well, like she's got like her Tuesday morning guy and her Friday, like
Yeah.
she makes it work.
Yeah.
Um, and they're all long term. And I was listening to her talk about it, and I was like, I I think I want that. Like I like that idea of that kind of variety, and definitely she loves all of them. I think she would identify as polyamorous.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like she's like, she was like, I've kind of moved past the idea that I'm gonna have like my one person,
Yeah.
that's your primary and then have other lovers. She's like, I just have lovers, and
Yeah.
they're all primary to me, in a way, in their own way.
Yeah.
And that has some appeal to me. So
It that is appealing.
we'll see.
What, I'm really curious. I wanna go back to your, uh, 5 years of, polyamorous, but not really polyamorous, and then your husband starts dating. How did you navigate the jealousy that was new and sudden?
Well, it's funny. We went to a therapist
Mhm.
before we ever started dating other people as like a preemptive, we're going to get this right, and
Yeah.
I'd read Sex at Dawn by that point and More Than Two, and like, I really was like, oh, I'm no problem here.
I got
Uh,
this.
yeah. And then when it started, it was so funny. I have a friend who's a therapist, and she just said, where I was at her house the other day, and she's like, polyamory, the thing no one ever gets good at. Like, yeah.
Uh,
Um,
uh-huh.
And there may be some truth to that. But y- so we had gone to the therapy and, theoretically had tools. Um, but it was still really a struggle because my husband didn't have any jealousy, but I really did. And
Mhm,
so I felt like I was always the one who had the problem.
mhm.
And one of the reasons I wrote that show, so I write shows when I have to work something out. Like, I'm struggling with something.
Yeah, yeah,
And I found that in our relationship, I was always trying to find a reason that he was wrong, that he had fucked up.
mhm,
And then I could get righteous about it.
mhm.
And so I remember when we had this fight once about dental dams because we had our agreement was that we were fluid bonded, right?
Yeah.
The hypocrisy of me. I mean, I certainly gave blowjobs without condom,
But
but I had this expectation somehow that if he was going to go down on somebody, he would use a dental dam.
mhm.
And he, surprise, did not. And I remember being like, this is part of our agreements. And he just was like, hell, I I don't even know where you get a dental dam. Like, have you ever met anyone who's used a dental dam? Like, I don't even know how I would use a dental dam. Like, and I and I remember I just started laughing because I was like, okay, that's true. Like, I don't actually know anyone who's ever used a
I
dental
don't
dam.
even know where you buy one, and I recommend them. I do, however, recommend cutting a condom in half,
Right, right,
lengthwise, and they have new
right.
panties now called Laurels that are, specifically for oral sex.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna buy some and see how they work.
I know. Actually asked Evelyn about it. Or you know what it was? I made a comment on, I think she posted about it on Facebook, and I was like, used by no one ever. And she
Yeah.
was like, nope, I actually got them and I tried them and they're pretty good. So,
Yes. Dental dams.
so I don't know that I ever got good at managing jealousy. Although I had a friend say something to me once that I found really helpful, which was, and sort of it sounds quasi scientific, and I have no idea what the actual science of this is, but she said something about how, jealousy like flares, right?
Yeah.
And then you just have to wait for the descending peptides to subside. And I remember
Oh.
being like, descending peptides. I have no idea what that means, but there was something about it that seemed like accurate
Yeah.
because that is the feeling of like where you're just like, that after, a day or whatever, you're like, okay, this is our agreement. I knew this was going to happen. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't mean he's going to leave me or whatever. So that was really helpful, just putting that frame around it. Like, it's not shameful to feel jealousy.
Yeah.
It's when you project onto the other person that they're wrong for doing something and, making your feelings their responsibility,
Yeah.
that is the problem.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's what I learned was to own my own responses and feelings and
Mhm.
not make them my husband's responsibility or fault.
Yeah.
So
I
I
love
don't,
that.
I don't know that I got good at it, but
Someone asked me the other day, like, how do I get this switch to flip? And I was like, "Oh, no, it's not a switch. Like, that's not how that works. It
yeah.
with practice, it'll get quieter. It's like a dimmer. There's a
Mhm.
dimmer. It's not a switch. You don't just turn it off." Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you just
It's
get
funny.
better at it.
You do. And the thing, I said this to my housemate who's kind of going through a process of, she's new to all of this and she has a
Mhm.
partner who's poly. And so she's learning. And I said, if I have one piece of advice for you, it's start seeing other people.
Yeah.
Like, it's so hard because she also sort of was default monogamous for
Yeah.
years and years.
Yeah.
And and she has this new guy in her life and she's really excited about him. It doesn't occur to her to go out and find somebody else,
Yeah.
right? Even though he's seeing other people. And I was like, you've got to start seeing other people. You've got to get the feeling in your body of you can still be excited about him and be in love and all of that, and enjoy other people's company. Because to me, the thing that was the most important was recognizing, like, oh, I can still love my husband
Mm.
and want to be in this committed relationship, and I can have relationships with other people that I know that they don't threaten it,
Yeah.
you know? And that was the only way I could really get it into my body, that his having relationships with other people didn't have to threaten me. So,
Right. Yeah. It's like having a lived experience and then being able to have empathy, right? Because if you
yeah,
haven't done it, it's really hard to be empathetic to a thing that you have no lived experience
totally.
of. Yeah.
And all you have are your own stories and narratives about what they must be doing and how. I mean, I remember just being like, having this fantasy of him like gazing into another woman's eyes and like having that sort of melty romantic feeling with her, and it would just drive me
Uh-huh.
crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't actually know what happened on their dates, but I suspect it probably wasn't super romantic and drippy like that,
Out of a romance novel.
right? Yeah, so I think you have to kind of really beware of your own stories and projections, and
Yeah,
recognizing that they are stories and projections.
totally.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Polyamory is such a good teacher for that, about uh, what we project onto other people. I mean, it's a huge that whole 10-year period we were married was such a huge growth time for me, because you can't default into
Mhm.
you know, the stories of romance novels. Like, you just
Yeah.
can't. It doesn't work. And um, so there was just so much educating that had to happen about being in a relationship, about communicating. Like, and I don't know that it's ever done, right?
No.
Like
Yeah.
that, poly secure, that was such a eye opener. I'm like, oh, I wish that had come out 10 years ago.
Seriously. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
wish we would
So
just learn about attachment styles at some point early in life.
right. Isn't that interesting how many people in the polyam and relationship anarchy like can talk now about really,
Yeah.
attachment and all that. And I feel like people in the monogamy world are just starting to catch up with that,
Yeah. Like,
because
oh,
they
I know
haven't
my
really.
love languages.
Right, exactly.
Now learn them.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. It's so true. I remember having a conversation with a guy on a date about love languages, and we ended up in sort of an argument about, were love languages how you wanted to love other people, or were love languages how you wanted to be loved? And I get that there's kind of both, but I felt like he was like, this is how I do it. I'm a words of affirmation kind of person or whatever. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, that's okay, but I think the point of love languages is that you learn how somebody else wants to be loved. And so then you try to love them that way. Like, you learn each other's languages, not like, here's mine, learn to speak it, or
So
whatever.
he's like, I am America and you need to speak English.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Wait, what?
I'm like, we only had the one D. Yeah,
Weird.
yeah. And then I built the wall.
I wonder, so I often tell people, like, I'll have people ask me questions about like they're dating, they're single, and they're like, I might want to, I don't think I want to be monogamous. I don't know. Or I'm dating, but I'm dating people who are monogamous and non-monogamous. And the advice I always give is begin as you intend to go on. Like, if you know that you don't want to be monogamous, don't start a monogamous relationship and think, well, we'll just change it later. Right.
Right.
And so I
I
wonder,
know.
yeah, I
That is
wonder
such
if
a problem.
what you think, how, if you had applied that advice, Do you think something would have been different?
I totally agree with you, and I give that advice too. Like, it's very difficult to,
Mhm.
change tracks. Because it feels like something broke, right? Like, we had this beautiful relationship and then my person wanted to be with somebody else.
Right.
Whereas if you start that way, it's like that's an aspect of who they are. And if I'm
Yeah.
going to love them, I have to love that part of them too, right?
Yeah.
And I think what happened in my relationship is that even though we talked about it, it was very easy to pretend that wasn't actually the case. Like,
Yeah.
so we paid lip service to being open, but because we didn't, it didn't reify until I love that word, reify. It didn't become real until he went on this date with this woman, and it was all of a sudden like, what? And then I had to admit that he had mentioned this very early on, and so maybe if it had started sooner, it wouldn't have
Yeah.
been such a big shock.
Yeah.
Um, but it's funny, I don't know. Because
Right?
maybe if it happened earlier, we wouldn't have stayed together.
Mm.
Um,
That's the big
it's
fear that people have, right? Like, well, if we push this, we might not stay together.
Mhm.
But like
and that's sometimes true.
that can happen.
Mhm. Yep.
At some
The funny
point,
thing is,
somebody's
I mean,
leaving one way or another.
right? I mean, it is true that it can be hard to point to a polyamorous relationship that you're like, that's what I want to do. Like, those people have it figured out.
Yeah.
I think at this point I have like three or four,
Mhm.
relationships like that. But I have seen many, many, many implode. And you know, I think it's the and who knows, maybe it's the nature of the kind of person that gets into a polyamorous relationship. I don't know. Maybe it's the stress polyamory puts on a relationship, but I think it is. I mean, it's fucking hard. It's just
Yeah.
hard. And I don't want to say it never gets easier because it does get easier.
Mhm.
And I think you get better at it.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, for years people hated Dan Savage because he said, or people in the polyam world
Sure,
hated because
sure.
he had that quote about he'd never been to a polyam or a, a third year anniversary for a polyamorous wedding.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Have you heard that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And um, and I remember being mad at him about it too, like, I'll show him kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and I did make it to my third anniversary,
We
but
just had
not
our
much.
6th for a triad.
Did you?
Yeah.
Here's a question for you, Alicia. Like, do you feel like because polyamory is becoming more mainstream and there's more resources now in the form of, groups and counselors
Mm.
and books, do you feel like you are seeing people learning how to do it better than, let's say, 10 years ago or 20 years ago?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, I think at one, there's a lot of resources, more resources, but also just being able to have any sort of community, have any sort of have people that you can talk to that aren't like, what the fuck are you doing?
It's
That
true, right?
alone makes a huge difference, right? When you feel like you're alone and you're doing a weird, freaky thing, it's so
Yeah,
easy to
yeah.
be like, oh, this is wrong. Shame, shame, shame. Got to change. Got to go back in the box and do the things that people say you're supposed to do. Yeah. Yeah.
It's so true. Like, when I first started, because we got together in 2005, I come from a pretty liberal family. My mother is a therapist, but they were not into the idea. Like, they
Yeah.
really struggled with, you know, and I think it's because they were worried that it would damage me or, you know, and yeah, I think that, and now I think they're much more open to it because so many more people are out about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not this 1% weird, what are you or did you join a cult? Like, are
Right.
you being abused? Did you join a cult? And what is going to happen to you? And I love you and I care
Right.
about you and I want the best for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, we
totally.
were married by a couple that had been together for 30 years. And they were polyam.
Mhm.
Uh, and we had it in our vows, so it was challenging for my folks, but they came around.
Yeah.
They when I started dating this other guy, they ended up embracing him. We had Christmases
Oh,
where we were all, all of us were there, and when my marriage ended and I stayed with that guy, he was still kind of part of the family, and even after we broke up, he and my mom still every once in a while get tea together. So
oh,
I
yeah.
tend to keep people in my life,
Yeah.
even after. That's where I'm at now, is that I don't ever feel like I don't ever want to break up with anybody ever again. Like,
Yeah.
and actually I don't feel like my marriage ended so much as our relationship changed. We actually took many years to get divorced even after we transitioned out of not living together.
Mhm.
Um, but that's kind of how I feel about relationships now, is that
Yeah.
the form might change, but I don't think that the love has to end. And that's my goal, is like
Yeah.
finding people that I really want to have in my life my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah, like, just wanna be with people I like.
Yeah.
Like, the love is great, but, like, I really wanna like them.
So much,
Yeah.
right? I want to be able
Yeah.
to talk to them. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. You had said, that there weren't a lot of, polyamorous relationships that you could point at and be like, "That's what I like," and the thought that came to mind for me was, I feel the exact same. I see that, and also there's not a lot of monogamous relationships that I can point at and go, "That's great."
Yeah.
That's one of the good ones there.
Right. I hear that. And I know that that is true for a lot of people.
Yeah,
I feel very lucky in that, well, lucky, I don't know if it's lucky, but I do have a lot of people in my life who are in monogamous relationships. Like, all of my best friends from my whole
yeah,
life. It's so weird. They have 20 plus year marriages. My parents have been married 58 years. They are still in love. They still have sex. I mean,
that's amazing.
I know, right? So I do have a lot of examples of it working.
Yeah,
Um, but
that's
I don't,
beautiful.
it is.
Yeah,
And sometimes I'm incredibly jealous,
yeah,
because I'm like, oh, it'd be so nice to not have to stress over it, and
yeah.
just have like this relationship that you just trust. It's there. It's like having hot water. Like, it's pretty reliable, right?
Sometimes the hot
Um,
water heater goes out and you fix it and
right, right.
and
But
then it's back.
I don't know. It's funny. I'm in a funny place in my life where I'm like, I don't. So you brought up the whole thing about, like, some dating monogamous people and non-monogamous people.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit in a struggle with that right now, because I am on the dating apps, and my my housemate and I talk about this, because she's like, her rule is she's only dating people who already have a partner, because she doesn't want anything to threaten her primary relationship
Uh-huh.
guy. And I feel like, and maybe this is the relationship anarchy part, whereas I'm like, I don't know, if I fall in love with somebody and they wanted to be monogamous, maybe I'd be monogamous. Like,
Yeah.
but generally, like, I know that that means that I would have to give up my lover of the last 2 years, who lives in California and visits every once in a while. So for the most part, I'm looking at E&M and, polyamorous people. But it's part of me, like, is like, what if I'm missing out on the love of my life because I'm not, willing to be monogamous? I don't know. I don't know.
Ooh.
Challenge.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. It's such
Yep.
a that is such a it's kind of this, like, weird idea that, is I if it's the right person, then they would be in the places that you're looking, or am I just avoiding, like, an opportunity? I always wonder, like, how does it really work? I just wanna know.
Oh,
There's no
no,
way to know.
I'm I mean, I'm so glad there are so like so many resources like podcasts and,
Mhm.
there's people talking about it. But I don't know that there's any right answer. Um,
Yeah.
I have definitely had the experience of dating monogamous people while being polyamorous and having to have the sad talk with my lovers of like, I'm going to be monogamous now. I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
And every time I've done that, the monogamous relation explodes and I have to go back to my lovers and be like, well, change my mind, So now I am a little bit wary of it. And the
Yeah.
truth is, I haven't gone out with anybody monogamous in a long time. But I do sort of like every once in a while, will pause on some, Tinder profile or Bumble profile or whatever and be like, oh, he seems
Maybe?
so monogamous and Christian. Nope, no. I'm kidding. A little bit.
Kinda.
Kind of.
Mhm.
Really awesome if he was monogamous and Christian. Um, I'm kidding, people. I'm kidding. I do not discriminate based on religion. Uh, on politics, I do though.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely, 100%. I have a, like, a real strong kink for feminists, like, real fucking
oh,
strong. I'm like, "Ooh,
mm.
yeah, come here."
I started a dating company during the pandemic. So, I'm a theater person, so all of my work dried up. So I was like, all right, well, I'd had this idea for years and years that I wanted to start a speed dating thing on the
Yeah.
internet on called Spinner.
Hmm.
And and the idea behind Spinner was you get put in your twosome for 5 minutes and you'd be given your prompts.
Yeah.
And then, you'd have your 5 minutes and then you'd spin to somebody else and you'd have, 6 or 7 spins a night or whatever. And I did create it and it was cool. And I got burned out after about 6 months because I am not a business person, nor am I a tech person. And the logistics of it all were like daunting. I
Uh-huh.
really liked the facilitation and the hosting. That's kind of my jam, but
Yeah.
the rest of it, eh.
It's a brilliant
But
concept.
thank you.
I like
The
it.
point being that everybody who got into this group, because I made it a Facebook group,
Yeah.
so you could find out about a spin in the Facebook group. But the qualifying questions were: do you consider yourself anti-racist, sex positive, and feminist?
Mm.
And if somebody argued with me about any of those, and I was like, okay, this isn't for you. Like, this is not your group.
Yeah, easy.
And it was really interesting how many men refuse to identify as feminist.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, that's fine, but you can't be in my group.
You do you,
Because,
boo.
right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Because, yeah, I'm like, if you don't identify as a feminist, then you probably shouldn't be fucking. You
Period.
know,
Yeah.
period.
Uh, one of my partners and I were talking about this the other day, and he had a really good kind of analogy. He was like, when people break up, typically one person is like, "Yeah, I'm breaking up with you," and the other one is like, "What? No, why would you do that? Like everything was great." Usually men are like, this relationship was working so good for me. Why would you break up with me? This was wonderful." And he
Yeah.
was like, "It's kind of like the patriarchy is being broken up with and is throwing this huge fit. Like, I don't understand. Like everything was great. This was a wonderful relationship. Why would you want to leave it?" I
Right?
was like,
You provided me with all the emotional support. You were
yeah.
my best friend. Yeah. You
Uh-huh. Why would you
organized all of our
leave
group outings.
now?
I know I've read articles about that, about how, single men are really struggling right now because
Yeah.
women are so much more savvy of like not accepting shoddy behavior.
Don't need it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's funny, I hadn't thought about this, but it makes me wonder if the rise of polyamory has contributed to that because women are talking to each other maybe more about who they're dating and the standards are
Yeah.
going up.
Yeah. Yeah. We're
Fascinating.
talking more about dating. We're talking more about sex. We're talking more about finances. We're, division
Right,
of
less
chores and
taboo.
labor. Like we're talking about
Mm.
everything. And
Yeah.
the nuclear family kept us all pretty separate other than, I don't know, coffee
Right,
or whatever.
right,
Playgroups. I don't know.
right, and you kinda had to hide your relationship struggles?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's good stuff.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, I don't want to take up your whole day. So I'm curious if there is anything that you would want the listeners to hear that I have not asked you.
Hmm. One of the things that's just been so helpful for me has been being a part of a group on Facebook called Trustable Sluts.
Ooh.
And it was started by some people in the Bay Area, and it's kind of expanded. But why that's so helpful for me is I feel like there's a lot of really honest discussion about not only people's struggles with having multiple partners, but also the joys of it.
Mm.
Even when I was running Relationship Anarchy, I felt like the focus was often on the challenges. And in fact, there was so the way Relationship Anarchy worked was there would be a topic, there'd be two topics, and we'd split into two, and you could go to either topic, or there was a third option, which was overcoming obstacles. So if you were struggling in your relationship, you could go to that and talk about what was happening.
Yeah.
And the thing that I feel like I've really loved about Trustable Sluts is sometimes I'm just like so enamored of people's joy and celebration of their relationships. Like one I was just reading about this morning, it was like a triad that's buying a house together. Um, and I thought that feels newish, seeing people talking about how it's working
Yeah.
and all of the good that's coming out of it, and like feeling more like it's a village than a nuclear family.
Yeah.
So I guess that would be my advice, is to talk about what works and what's good as opposed to the focus on what isn't working. Because I think that's sort of human nature, is to default. Like I know I do that when I get together sometimes with my girlfriends, like I'll bitch about my
Mhm.
relationship or whatever. And I really am trying to catch myself and focus on, but the things that I love. Like
Yeah.
this works, this is great. Like, because it really changes my attitude about my partner.
Uh-huh.
Like when I think about all the wonderful aspects rather than like the one or two that I'm like, well, he doesn't do this. So I guess that's my advice I would leave people with, is focus on what you love and
Mm.
what you want as opposed to what you're not getting or don't
Yeah.
want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. That's beautiful. Gratitude's like so important and so easy to skip because it sometimes it's hard.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Okay, I have one more. I have a
Okay.
segment that I hold aside for our the supporters of the show on our Patreon, and it
Mhm.
is called Just the Tip. And it is, what is your favorite or best sex tip? That was like four really excellent tips. I love it.
Okay. A little extra.
Yeah,
A little
yeah.
more than the tip.
The whole
Oh,
thing. This is amazing. I have really, really enjoyed talking to you, Eleanor. This is awesome.
thank you, Alicia. Ditto. I so appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Gotta find the right button. Thank you so much to Eleanor for coming on the show. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Bye.